You're listening to What's in Store, the official Hardlines podcast series, bringing you the hottest conversations with players in the home improvement retail industry, and brought to you by Jeld-Wen.
I'm Steve Payne, the editor of Hardlines, and we have a special guest with us today, Peter Turkstra. He's the owner of the 11 unit Turkstra Lumber in the western edge of Lake Ontario, based in Hamilton, serving the Niagara Peninsula and other parts of southwestern Ontario. Thank you for joining us, Peter.
Well, thank you for having me.
Did I get that right? Do you have 11 units right now?
We have 11 lumber yards, a truss plant, which also makes panels, and a mill, and a specialty trim and door division. And we also have a specialty branch that services industrial accounts, more manufacturing type customers. And we have a design center. So we kind of round up or round down depending on how you ask the question.
So it's a big operation. It's 72 years old. According to my research, it was founded by Peter Turkstra Sr. in 1953. Would that be your grandfather?
That would be my grandfather. And he didn't start Turkstra Lumber until he was in his 50s. So it's an interesting story.
Wow.
Yes, he was. He had had a few careers prior to that, and then decided to get into the lumber business in his 50s. In the 50s.
So that was for a late start. He started a heck of a business because Turkstra Lumber, for those of us in Southern Ontario, is a legend. Is a legendary independent lumberyard. And design center and trim and door shop and truss and a mill, all of those things. You're a member of the ILDC, right?
Correct. Yeah, the Independent Lumber Dealers Cooperative.
Yes. Thank you for joining us. I want to start off with an easy one. What do you make of the turmoil that the world economy has descended into since Liberation Day last Wednesday, April the 2nd? Are we looking at a recession? Are we looking at tough times? Are we going to struggle through? What's the take of Peter Turkstra on all this mess?
Well, when it comes to specifically our industry, we're already in a pretty major recession, which we'll talk about, I guess, but this just adds to it. So even prior to the tariffs, we were already in a downturn, which might exceed 70% year-over-year decline in housing. And we can speak to the reasons for that. But the tariffs have only made it worse, because what's happened, of course, is that people clam up. They have job uncertainty. They have future uncertainty. They're worried. They're anxious. They're watching this gong show. And the last thing they do is go out and make major investments. So it's a lot of turmoil. It has certainly sparked a buy Canadian philosophy. You know, we all would like to say we're going to support each other and we're going to elbows up and get through this. But the truth is that remains to be seen. We don't know yet whether Canadians will have the economic means to promote local and to shop, or if they will regain their confidence. And I think a lot of that will depend on whether or not our relationship with the U.S. becomes normalized, because it goes beyond the financial tariff considerations. Whether you ski in upstate New York or you cross the border in Vermont, we've had wonderful friendly relationships. And of course, the mingling of manufacturing that you've heard about. So right now it's in chaos, and chaos never helps consumers or anybody. But meanwhile, we're in Canada, we have our own issues, and people have a lot of debt, and they're trying to carry this. So there's a real potential in our industry for bankruptcies and closures, similar to probably 2009.
Simon Gouin, who's a highly placed executive at Group BMR in Quebec, said said to us about 3 weeks ago, if people have a choice between buying groceries or painting a wall, they're going to buy groceries.
Yes. Yeah, I think a lot of what we sell is discretionary. It requires planning. And we could see this coming a while back because the people that would normally be sold out for decks for the spring or sold out, the trades were up to 2 years ago, very hard to find. And now they're sitting on the sidelines and they don't have a backlog of work to be, and at the end of the day, I'm not at the front end, I'm in the middle part. They need to be successful. And if they're successful, then they're going to buy materials from a lumberyard like us or a competitor even. And right now that is evaporated. Now we're a little bit fortunate because we're not pure tract builder, which I expect to be down between 70 and 90% year over year in Ontario. But we also do a lot of the custom home builders, and the custom home builders are in a different demographic, and they're actually still quite busy. They don't make up for the tragic descent of volume, but they tend to build more complex houses and require more support, and they're still busy. In fairness, some of the houses that they're building today should have been completed 3 years ago, but they were hung up with permits and conservation authorities and all the red tape that you're hearing about. But it's helping us through. And then we have a sneaky large retail component with a new e-commerce page, which has really been taking off. But that will depend on whether consumer confidence comes back. So in that respect, we're in the same boat as the Home Hardwares, the Canadian Tires, the Home Depots. Will people want to shop?
Right. I want to draw attention to your 70 to 90% down in tract builders comment just now. Is it as bad as that in the tract builders?
It is, and I've been trying to get through to the municipalities. It's basically a very simple formula. The municipalities over the last 10 years have become punch drunk on charging levies and all kinds of things to the building community, and that are totally out of line with any kind of normalcy because they're struggling with their own ability to control their own finances. So they see it as low-hanging fruit. But the problem we have is if you chart it, it worked, even though these fee levels were egregious. But it worked when the housing market was panicked by COVID and going up, up, and up. So people thought they could get the value out of it. And the money was cheap. Interest rates were at 1.7. So when you could almost go on the map and say when interest rates moved from almost free money to 7%, well, at the same time, the bank said, well, now we're nervous. We're not going to lend anybody money. And I think the people who had their parents that would, fess up the first 300,000 had already bought. So now you're into normal people that need to try and buy an entry-level townhouse, and they're up to $150,000 of fees and HST on the house. So instead of it being $650, which would be affordable, it's $800, and that extra $150 is on a mortgage. So over the life of a mortgage, it's basically $300,000. So that's the part that I think the consumers don't understand, and I hope that the industry does a better job of educating the consumers, because we're now seeing in the States, we now all understand that the Americans are paying the tariffs. Like when they tariff, it's their people that pay that inflation. Well, in our case, because they didn't re-index HST, for instance, at the federal level, as the price of houses went up, it basically became more punitive, and they took the taxes freely. And now we're in an absolute disaster. We've been seeing it coming for 2 years, but the levels of government haven't been listening.
Peter, you've just arrived back in Hamilton. You told us before we went to air from Florida. And Hamilton is very much on my mind because it's a steel city. It used to produce a lot more steel at Stelco and Dofasco than it does currently. But it's still a steel town. It's still an industrial town. Is there extra nervousness about the 25% steel tariffs put by Trump on Canadian steel?
I think we're all in this together. We don't know whether that'll be lifted or it'll be doubled. We don't know. I feel for the people in the automotive industry that are already coming to a standstill as construction has beforehand. So I think that there's always an emphasis on steel, but if you were to actually look at the number of people employed in the construction industry, even if you remove the vendors like myself, you looked at the actual tradespeople involved in building, 100,000 houses, it's millions of people hours. And it actually is a much bigger industry than steel. And it doesn't seem to get the same attention. But by no means am I suggesting it's more important. All parts of the economy are important. But in this day and age, the nice thing about construction is if you turn it back on, you get an immediate multiplier effect. You don't have to go and build a whole bunch of factories, and you don't have to ask for billions in EV plants or something. You just kickstart it, and if you kickstart it, they'll hire trades, and those trades, of course, spend money.
About 3 years ago, we started hearing 700,000 housing units a year. We currently build, over the last few years, we currently build about 250,000 housing starts a year. Those include condos and high rises and single family homes, but 250,000 a year housing starts. Now we're told by officialdom that we can build 750,000. And some people say it can't be done because we don't have the labor. Talk about the labor shortage and how it affects the industry and how it affects Turkstra Lumber as far as getting workers in the yard and drivers and all of that.
Well, I'd say that, COVID changed everything. So during COVID, finding quality folks, and we're blessed to have so many people who work here for so long, so we're not always on the hunt, but it was very difficult to find any extra capacity of people in that market. and employers were upping their wages to try and maintain and to be good employers. So that was a real challenge. That dynamic has now changed. We are, in essence, our industry is trying to protect our employees that we have. So we're not really on the hunt for a bunch of extra drivers. If anything, the question is, how do we protect the jobs that we have? In terms of the 500,000 houses, we would have a shortage if we were to try and get to that level. And I disagree with one of the politicians about doing these all in factories. That's not the best way to trigger entrepreneurship because the channel is already there. It's very costly. And when government gets involved, they normally bugger it up. So I would go back to the old-fashioned way and get rid of the red tape and let's move on. But right now, the houses aren't selling. They're just simply unaffordable. And I think some of the councillors and the mayors think, well, the developers should do their job. Well, they can't put up houses if the bank won't lend them money because the pro forma shows that they won't make any money on a house. And if they're sitting on land, they're better to wait out this cycle until it actually causes the opposite of what the government wants, which is it'll cause some prices to go up and then people will start to jump back in fearing they missed the bottom. And meanwhile, affordability is going to be an issue. So we're so far off the 500,000. I would just hope we can get back to where we were 2 years ago.
Right.
Which will still leave us in an affordability crisis.
Right.
So I think it's easy for the politicians on all sides to make promises. But at the end of the day, they need to turn to their customers. By that, I mean their builders and their developers and ask them what they could do to help them. We tend to do that, for instance, with an EV factory, and we're going to bring them in to do Volkswagen or whatever. And I'm not against that. But when are they going to speak to the large builders or the small builders or the renovators? Because it's not just the track builders. It's all of them. It's the people that do decks and fences and all of them. And they're all off right now. They're at least underutilized. They're doing whatever they can to make ends meet. And because they're often, they are all generally subcontractors, you're not going to see them in the EI numbers right away because they're very proud people and they'll try and stay away from EI. It's not like a factory where you're laid off. There's always hope. And it's discouraging.
So Mark Carney's announcement a few days ago that he was going to have the biggest sale of federal lands to developers, you remain to be convinced of that?
Well, I think if they free up those kind of lands. And by the way, there are millions of houses that are stuck in red tape turmoil that go back and forth in the different municipalities, and do they have water or not, and all that stuff. If he does that, and he does it through the developers' channels, or sells it the way, when a school closes, it goes to tender, builders buy the school land, and then they build houses on it, or they build condos. If he does that, I think it could be effective. If it's going to be, well, you buy this and then we manage it, he has to trust the entrepreneurs and sell them the assets at a very fair price with incentives. Don't ask me what they are. He needs to ask them what would make it fly. And then, and I suspect it's going to be regional. In Western Canada, you haven't had the same collapse as Ontario. But in Western Canada, a lot of your DC charges, unless I'm mistaken, I think Calgary might be 20,000. A townhouse in Hamilton's almost 75 before the HST. Yeah. So it really, it's across the board. My message would be, trust the entrepreneurs. They're the ones who can kick in quickly. They're the ones where there's thousands of them, versus your own planning and then trying to push it back through your own government.
Right. E-commerce. Every time I turn around, Canadian Tire has pledged to inject another, whether it's $2 billion or $5 billion into e-commerce. Meanwhile, over in St. Jacobs, there's Home Building Center, which is on Home Hardware, which is a good old-fashioned co-op. It's owned by the individual dealers. Are we going to see a bifurcated world where there's two types of retailers, those that can play in e-commerce and those that cannot? For example, what are you doing at Turkstra Lumber? When we interviewed Tim Zabransky, I think he was your fleet manager or is your fleet manager, about a year ago. He talked about van purchases and Turkstra Lumber getting into more parcel type deliveries. Has that come to fruition?
Well, we changed our approach. If anything, we're kind of like Amazon without the box. And I actually borrowed this idea from an Ace Hardware in Florida, where I noticed that they were delivering them with their own branded vehicles, as if you were an account customer and calling in. They were just using their omni-channel to service different customers. So it was a huge project for us. We installed an actual Shopify, very professional e-commerce. So I have a background working for IBM prior to the family business, and I didn't want to snap in one of these really basic e-commerce that don't have the real flexibility, because on e-commerce, people expect a high level of functionality now, everything from pictures on delivery and all those things we're used to with Amazon. So we originally experimented with boxes and stuff, and then realized that it was easier to take the order, put it through our fulfillment area where we screen all of our orders already for centralized delivery, or wherever it makes the most sense to minimize travel and to optimize the Moffats. And they all go through that same process. And then we deliver them in a truck. And we actually had an old, not that old, a Sprinter truck that we rebranded. And so it'll make deliveries. If this really takes off, we might go and then outsource to those firms, which are now in place that do Amazon and so forth. But we're avoiding the packaging. The packaging, you think about it. You got to always on the level. Well, we experimented with a level. Good luck finding a box for a level. Right. Are you gonna? So the way we're doing it is actually the traditional way of doing a delivery. No different than if you came into my store and gave us your Visa card, or you came in as an account customer and we told you you'd have delivery the next day. But it's now much more modern because it has all those touch and feels that e-commerce use.
So is it reaching all 11 of your stores, or is it in a pilot project in Hamilton right now?
No, it's 100% live. The inventories for the 11 stores are fully integrated with all the back ends. You can arrange, I'm not hoping for another virus, but you can arrange for picking it up in the branch, or you can arrange to do it. And it serves several purposes. The first is just being found. I mean, we're a 70-year-old business, but people who move here from Toronto didn't grow up smelling cedar in a Turkstra Lumber or a Home Hardware for that matter. But they might likely go to a Home Hardware because of brand recognition, because it's a bit like Canadian Tire. And on the flip side, we have this incredible reputation with the trades and the builders. So we have a strength there. So if your product is going to be found on the web because somebody's simply searching it, it really helps to have an e-commerce. And I see a lot of single branch locations that I fear are really going to struggle. It's never going to be as big a part of our business as some of the online retailers, but I'm amazed at what people order online. We also have up to 6 people in our live chat in our customer service branch who pick up the phone if it rings more than 4 times, and they're all as skilled as anybody in my branches. So they came from the branches so they can answer the phone, but they also are doing the live chat. So our live chat is not with bots, it's with a real person. So if they get stuck and they start to live chat, we can help them fill their basket. You know, a little biased, but why not?
Well, that's a revolutionary idea. Live chat with actual people. Is that in your Stony Creek branch where your customer service?
That is the customer service branch, which deals with all things, the orders that come through on internet
and
supporting it, are all in our Arvin Avenue location in Stony Creek.
Okay. I want to ask you finally, to what percentage do you attribute to the pros, and what percentage do you attribute to consumers at Turkstra Lumber?
So we'd probably end up being about 75% on account, 25% retail. But sometimes when people are building big dream homes, they don't hire a builder, they do it and they open their own account. So it's a little bit blurry. So I'd probably say we're more like 65-35 would be a better overall guess. But in our Fort Erie branch or Ridgeway, we'd be much higher because it's basically cottage country. So in some places, like the building I'm in here at head office, we have a crappy, I don't want to hurt their feelings. We have a store downstairs that's limited in space and a great lumberyard behind it. And in some of the other locations, we might have 4,000 feet of retail. So it really varies branch to branch.
And yet you're getting into the e-commerce. So that's bully for you, because full marks for you.
Trying, but it was a huge undertaking.
Yeah,
and I've seen a lot of my competitors just buy something and snap it in and lose their identity, and then if it's not functional, the customers will not engage or re-engage. And I think some of our stats, we've had up to 5,000 or 10,000 people there, looking and engaged in what I call our sticky glue. But the truth is that many of them don't necessarily finish the order. They get in, and I think then they realize they need help, and then we try and help them in our branches. So we've seen definitely an uptick in our branches of people who come in who may have started on the web. And you want your customer to find you one way or the other. And my grandfather, bless his soul, didn't care about retail 50 years ago. So some of our buildings have 8-foot ceilings with core slab. But on the web, that doesn't matter. You look beautiful and shiny, and as long as your navigation's great and you're using the tools, and companies like Shopify can really help. But it was almost a 2-year project, a full team of cross-functional people to get it to work. And even now, we're still refining
it. That's fantastic. I'll have to check it out. Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Okay.
And talking about a wealth of subjects. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And let's hope that this chaos passes and we go back to life as we knew it.
Indeed.
All right. Thank you very much.